Hello, today we're going to talk about indirect speech part 1. The aims of this presentation are the following. We are going to teach students how to report affirmative and negative statements. We are going to learn about the necessary changes in verb tenses, pronouns, and time-place expressions. And finally, we are going to practice some of the theory with practical exercises. So let's have a look at indirect versus direct speech. Direct speech is the exact words a speaker uses. Normally when we write, we use quotation marks in direct speech. On the opposite, indirect speech reports what a speaker said without using the exact words. In this case, there are no quotation marks. Let's have a look at the examples on the screen. I am going to milk the cows today, said the farmer. This is an example of direct speech. And as you see, we have quotation marks. And now the sentence in indirect speech. The farmer said that he was going to milk the cows that day. Here, we are reporting what the farmer said, but not using the exact words. And as you can see, there are no quotation marks. Okay, now let's focus on indirect speech statements. An indirect speech statement reports what a speaker said without using the exact words. The word that can introduce the indirect statement, but you can also omit it. For example, direct speech, renewable energies are more environmentally friendly, the teacher said or told us. And the sentence in indirect speech, the teacher told us or said that renewable energies were more environmentally friendly. Okay. Remember that when transforming statements, you have to check whether you have to change one of the following: pronouns, place and time expressions, and most importantly, tenses. Okay. Let's have a look at the changes in verb tenses. The verb in the indirect speech statement is usually in a different tense from the verb in the direct speech statement. So, let's have a look at the example on the screen. We are going to plant new crops this year, the farmer said or told us. The sentence in indirect speech goes as follows. The farmer said or told us that they were going to plant new crops that year. So as you can see, we have changed the verb form from are going to plant to were going to plant. Okay, so all the verb tenses go back one step in the past. This means that if we have a simple present, it goes back to a simple past. If we have a simple past, it goes back to a past perfect. And the same happens with the present perfect. The same applies for the progressive tenses. Present progressive or continuous goes back to past progressive or continuous, and the past progressive goes back to the perfect progressive. So remember, all the verb tenses go back one step in the past. Here you have a table with the necessary changes that you have to make in all the verb tenses, from direct speech to indirect speech. Okay, and now you have changes for the future, will and would, and for the modal verbs. Can gets to could, may to might, and must to had to. Okay, now let's have a look at some exceptions. You do not change some verbs in indirect speech, especially modal verbs in the past, should, ought to, could, and might. You never change the verbs in the second and third conditional. For example, I should have planted less rye this year, said Mike. So this sentence in the indirect speech would be, Mike said that he should have planted less rye that year. As you can see, the verb tense is maintained. Should have planted and should have planted. So there is no change in this case. Now let's have a look at changes in pronouns. Remember and be careful with the possible changes in personal pronouns as well as in possessive pronouns or determiners. Let's have a look at the example on the screen. The terrible storm has destroyed all the crops we planted last month, she said. So in this sentence, direct speech, we have a subject, we. Now let's have a look at the sentence in indirect speech. She said that the terrible storm had destroyed all the crops they had planted the month before. So here we have a change from we to they. And finally, there are also place and time expressions that you need to change. Let's have a look at the table on the screen. Now is changed into then at that time. Today is replaced by that day. Tomorrow, the following, the next day. Yesterday, the previous day, the day before. Next month, the following next month. Next year, the following next year. And last month, the month before the previous or preceding month. Then we have last year, the year before, the previous preceding year. Here changes into there. And this, these, that, and those. Okay, now we're going to have a look at some cases when we never use reported speech. These cases are the following. When reporting what someone has just said. For example, I'm going to water the plants, Mike said. In this case, we can use the same words. Mike said he's going to water the plants, or you can go one step back into the past. Mike said he was going to water the plants. We do not use reported speech when we report something that is still true. For example, this soil is not very rich in nutrients, says Luke. Luke says that this soil is not very rich in nutrients, because this is a statement which is still true. Okay, and now let's have a look at some practice. In this exercise, you have to rewrite the following statements as indirect speech. Remember to pay attention to the necessary changes that you may have to do with pronouns, place and time expressions, or verb tenses. Let's have a look at the first sentence. I won't be ratifying the Kyoto Protocol because it can significantly damage our country financially, said President George Bush. And here comes the key. President George Bush said that he wouldn't be ratifying the Kyoto Protocol because it could significantly damage their country significantly. Right, so in this case, we have the subject, I, in direct speech, is changed with he. There is a change in the subject. Then we have a change in the verb tense. Won't be ratifying becomes wouldn't be ratifying. Okay? And it can becomes it could. And finally, we have a change in the possessive determiner. Our country becomes their country. Let's have a go at the next one. Species have started going extinct as a result of climate change, declare Hadley Center scientists. And here comes the key. Hadley Center scientists declare that the species had started going extinct as a result of climate change. In this case, there is just a change in the verb tense. So, from the present perfect, we go one step back into the future, and we use the past perfect, had started. Let's have a look at the next one. The Earth's ice is starting to melt rapidly here, declared James Hansen. So in this sentence, we have the verb tense is starting, and then we have a place expression, here. And here comes the key. James Hansen said that the Earth's ice was starting to melt rapidly there. So as you can see, there is a change in the verb tense from is starting, present continuous, one step back into the past, past continuous, was starting. And then here is changed into there. Let's have a look at the next one. CO2 will soon start to acidify the ocean, said the scientist. And the key is the scientist said the CO2 would soon start to acidify the ocean. In this case, you only have to change the verb tense. From the future will start to the conditional form would start. And let's have a look at the final one. There are things the White House doesn't want us to hear, but I'm going to say them anyway, said James Hansen. In this case, you have different verb tense forms, are, doesn't want us, and going to say. Okay, and we have subject, I, and the personal pronoun, us. So pay attention to all these changes. And the key is, James Hansen said there were things the White House didn't want us to hear, but he was going to say them anyway. So as you can see, you need to change the verb are into were. Okay, the pronoun remains the same. Then there is a change in the subject from I to he, and a change in the verb tense. Going to say, he was going to say. And this is all for today. Thank you very much.